You are listening to episode number 99 of the Everything Ham Radio podcast. Today we're going to be looking back over the last 100 episodes and talking about the top 10 and my favorites and some other stuff, so stick around. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Everything Ham Radio podcast. My name is Curtis, my call sign is Kilo 5 Charlie Lima Mike, and I am your host for this podcast. This podcast comes out every other Thursday at 4 o'clock in the morning. Really bright and early, so it's there for your commute to work. So this episode we were talking about a overlook of the last... Basically, it's actually 101 episodes, but basically the last 100 episodes. This is episode number 99. I started episode 0, so 100 episodes. Tomorrow is next episode is the 100th episode, so I can't believe it's already here. But this episode, we're going to be talking about, kind of going over the overview of it, talking about the top 10 numbers and overall downloads, and what my thoughts are on each of them, and talk about my favorite one and a few other things. So before we get started, you can find the show notes for today's episode with links to each one of these I'm talking about in the show notes at everythinghamradio.com/podcast/99. That's the number 99. You can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/groups/Everything Ham Radio, or the page at facebook.com/Everything Ham Radio. You can find me on YouTube at youtube.com/Everything Ham Radio, and on Twitter at K5CLM, which is probably the easiest place to get a hold of me at, or maybe Facebook, but Twitter is probably the best. So, what is going on with me here lately? Well, here it is, nearly the 100th episode. This last episode I had my wife on. What did y'all think about that? I had really enjoyed it. I had wanted to get her on way back in like the episode 32 or so. I had episode 31 where I spoke with a local female ham here and got her perspective on what it was like to be a ham radio operator and being a female. And then I wanted to get a non-hams version of it as well. But that didn't happen. So we didn't do it. Well, now we finally did last episode, and I hope y'all enjoyed it. So, like I said, in this episode, we are talking about the last 100 episodes, and we're more specifically, first off, going to be talking about the top 10. So, let's go ahead and get started. And just a note, all the download numbers that I'm going to be telling is accurate as of March 5th, 2018. So that will be a little bit delayed. There'll be a little bit more downloads by the time this airs, but this is as of March 5th, 2018. So starting out, number 10. Number 10 was episode number 76, software-defined radios, and as of March 5th, we have 2,788 downloads. Now, this episode was the first of 3 times that I had Rhea Jarum into RJ on the show. We talked about, first off, what software-defined radio was, and secondly, what are some of the options out there. We talked about the Flex radio system, how ICOM has a software-defined radio in their new, what was it, IC 3200 or something like that, 8200, something like that. The new radio that just came out is software defined. The what do you call them? The KPC3 and not the KPC3. The KX2 and KX3, I believe, are software defined radios as well. But mostly the brand that we talked about was the Flex Radio Systems radios, and those are really nice radios, and it actually led to the next episode that we did together, the second time she was on the show, and that was episode number 83, where we talked about remote operations. I don't know what was funner, about episode number 83, whether it was actually talking about remote operations or that I actually got a chance to actually get on using my laptop here in Texas and remote to her radio in New Jersey and going over the air. It was cool. It really was. And I got to play with it for I think about an hour or so while I was at work one day, and it was dead. So that was pretty cool. I made a couple contacts, and first HF contact that I made in I don't know how long. So it was fun. So number 9 in the top 10 countdown was episode number 71, and that was Field Day with my good friend Ian Cohen, KM4IK. In this episode, we had 2,804 downloads, and this was the second time that Ian came on, and actually the first time that he basically saved my bacon, so to speak. I had a interview fall through, and at the last minute, Ian was nice enough to come on or come back on and talk about Field Day with us. So it was awesome. We had an awesome time. Ian, at the time, I don't think he is anymore, but at the time he was the Field Day coordinator for his local club there, and he came on and talked about some of the stuff that they were doing there in preparation of Field Day, and some stuff that you can do, and tips and stuff like that about, and generally talked about Field Day 2017 rules and stuff like that, and what the multipliers and stuff were, and the bonus points and all that good stuff. So that was the second time that we have Ian on, and we've had him on I think like 5 or 6 times now. He's pretty well become a co-host whenever I needed it. So Ian, thank you very much for all that you've done for this podcast. Okay, so episode number 8 in the top 10 was episode number 77, and that was when we had George and Jeremy from what was then the Ham Radio 360 Workbench podcast. George and Jeremy have been, I would say, pretty good friends of mine ever since I started this podcast and they started theirs. We've become pretty good, decent friends, and we've had a whole bunch of conversations. I've learned a lot from them. Maybe they've learned from me. I don't know. But anyways, since then, they've actually changed their name at their podcast, and it's now just the Ham Radio Workbench podcast. And if you haven't heard of their show or haven't listened to it in the past, basically it is a bi-weekly deep dive into everything technical about ham radio. They talk about small computers. They talk about, I think that they've made a SWR meter, or no, that's not what it is. What is it? Yeah, I guess it is an SWR meter. Some kind of meter that they've made. I don't remember off the top of my head. But anyways, they made boards for design and made boards for it and sold it. And I think they've sold over 800 copies or something like that. I think I heard on the last episode. They didn't expect it to go over as good as it did, but it did. And they're working on version 2 of that right now. They've made dummy load circuits. They've made a powered disconnect circuit, I think. They've made quite a few circuits, and they are a very technical podcast. A lot of what they talk about is over my head. But they do have a great show, and if you like that more technical stuff, definitely check them out. And there is a link to their website in the show notes of today's episode. All right, so moving on, episode number 41 brings in the number 7 slot. We talked about Morse code in that episode. There is a total of 3,053 downloads in this one. This one was a solo episode, and it was dealing with basically everything Morse code. We started out talking about the history of what Morse code was and how it became, and moved on to methods of learning it, and then talked about several different types of keyers: the straight key, the paddle key, the bug, the auto keyer, and so on and so forth. Next up is on number 6 of the top 10 is episode number 28. And that was a very interesting episode for me. I had Alan Applegate, K0BG, on the show, and we talked about mobile installations. There were 3,106 downloads. Again, this was as of March the 5th, 2018. Alan is, I would say, a guru of radio installations, and he has a website to prove it, and you can find a link to that as well in the show notes of today's episode. We talked about how to install radios, grounding issues, how to run wire, where to put, plug where to get power from, how to mount your antenna, all that. It was a very informative episode, and I learned a lot. I mean, I didn't realize that there was so much issues with mobile installations. All right, so next up is episode number 5 in the top 10, and that is episode number 54, and that is building antennas. We have 3,206 downloads. In this episode, it talked basically it was a solo episode again, talking about different types of antennas and how to build them. We talked about a ground plane, a J-pole, a Yagi antenna. I talked about how to actually make them. I included some dimensions on some antennas and stuff like that. We moved on to HF, which is actually a whole lot easier to build antennas for, and stuff like that. And that kind of goes right along with mobile installations to a certain degree, but you typically don't build mobile antennas. You typically buy them, but I guess you could build them if you wanted to. But building, I think, is more for home use. Number 4 in the top 10 also goes right along with building antennas, and that is episode number 56. Just 2 weeks later, I talked about lightning protection. This episode has 3,233 downloads. It holds, like I said, the number 4 slot, and there is like a lot of information in this. I actually had no clue that the way that I was grounding my station was not right. I had always been taught that you stick a ground rod in the ground at least 8 foot and hook your radios to it and you're good. But that's not actually the case, and you actually need to take a step further. There's like you need to put a grounding rod or grounding strap line thingy all the way around your building, and do several ground rods in a radial pattern around your shack or around your antenna to get the actual optimum grounding effect. And then having a steel or a metal block or something that you can use to isolate your house from the antennas or your house from the coax, and use it for quick disconnects and stuff like that. But yeah, it was a very, very interesting doing the research for that, and I learned a whole bunch. Okay, so next up is the number 3 slot in the top 10. And this one actually held the number 2 slot for quite a while. And just recently, within the past, I think, month or 6 weeks, something like that, that actually dropped to number 3. And that was the first time that I had Ian calling on, where we talked about PSK31. And Ian and I had a very interesting conversation with this, and the stuff that he told me and talked about with PSK31, it just really wanted me to really made me, sorry guys, I can't talk today, really made it where I wanted to go out and actually try it. I have yet to do so, and here it is, basically about a year later, I think now, from when I recorded this. But it was very interesting learning about PSK31, the things that they can do, And, like I said, I really want to try it, but I have yet to do so, but maybe one day. Okay, so what took over the number 2 slot from Ian in that episode is episode number 72, where I spoke with Glenn Papel, KW5GP. We talked about Arduino projects for ham radio. This one has 3,952 downloads. Now, Glenn is a 3-time, I believe 4-time author with amateur radio books. He wrote the Arduino for ham radio, more Arduino for ham radio, which actually just came out shortly before we did this interview. And he also wrote the high-speed multimedia for amateur radio, which is like the first iteration of a ham radio mesh networking book. A lot has changed since that book was wrote, but it's still usable with the way that it's wrote. Glenn was a very awesome guy, and he was hilarious. He had me rolling pretty well throughout the interview. I even had to cut off the recording at least once that I can remember, just to regain my composure, because literally I could not stop laughing at some of the stuff he was saying. But yeah, so that is the number 2 slot, and to find out the number 1 slot, you're going to have to stay tuned. So stick around, y'all. We will be right back after a word from West Mountain Radio. West Mountain Radio has recently released their 3rd generation power gate, the Epic Power Gate. It uses advanced technology to achieve a very low, 0.05 volts to be exact, power loss, and has a maximum flexibility to charge modern batteries. It features a solid and durable construction in an aluminum case, and includes mounting holes for convenient and secure use in mobile units. It uses Anderson power pole connectors that are standard on all West Mountain Radio products. The Epic Power Gate is a 12-volt backup power system rated at 40 amps continuous from either a power supply or a battery. Any equipment that is connected through it will instantly switch to battery during a loss of power. Not only does the Epic Power Gate act as a backup power switch, it also has a battery charge controller, so your batteries will remain charged when hooked up to a power source. The Epic Power Gate can charge all chemistries of batteries and supports a smart charging program for lead acid and lithium ion batteries charging up to 10 amps. As an added bonus to this iteration of the Power Gate line, the Epic Power Gate also has a solar charge controller. If you would like to know more about the Epic Power Gate or any other item that West Mountain Radio has, go to everythinghamradio.com/WMR and make sure you get your free USB port monitor with your purchase. Alright, so we are back, and the number 1 slot in my top 10 all-time downloads for the Everything Ham Radio podcast is episode number 53, and that was about stealth antennas. This one has been my number 1 since probably week 2 after it was released. It basically climbed the ranks of my podcast of the 54 episodes that I had out at the time rather quickly, and has been at number 1 for well over a year. I honestly, it in one way it surprises me that it's number 1 and it stayed number 1 because it was a solo person type podcast, which it seems like y'all like the interview style more than the solo head type, which is totally understandable. It's where the conversation just makes it roll a whole lot easier than just me sitting here talking at a blank wall. But anyways, on the other hand, I can see why it's number 1 as well. I totally get it. Stealth antennas is a very big subject in amateur radio because there's so many people out there that live in HOAs that don't allow antennas, or live in cities that have ordinances against antennas or towers or anything like that. You don't have the options that I do, where I can put up pretty much whatever I want. So you have to get these stealthy type antennas that you can put up to basically camouflage or hide your antenna. And first thing that pops into my head is like a flagpole one. That's probably one of the most commonly that I've heard of. Of course, then again, you can also go and just like do like a mobile or a temporary setup. Stick an antenna on a tripod or something like that in your yard and operate for a little bit and then take it back down. You could totally do something like that. But if you want to put up an antenna and keep it up, you have to be kind of stealthy about it. You have to hide it really good so that your neighbors don't know that it's an antenna and you don't get in problems with the HOA or the city or what have you. This episode content actually came from a post on QRZ that had 10 different items or 10 different ideas for stealth antennas. And of course, I emailed the author of it and asked him if I could use it. I wish I could have brought him on the show and talked with him actually about it, and got his perspective. But at the time, I wasn't able to record anything with somebody talking with me, because I didn't have internet at home, and I was mainly recording stuff at work, I believe, at this time. Maybe it was right after I got my recordings area set up here at home. I'm not sure, but I didn't have internet. So I couldn't do those type things. So it was a solo type thing. But he had a lot of great ideas. Some of them, just off the top of my head, of course, the flagpole one. He had one where the wire was strung around an umbrella. Ones that are like, I can't think of any more off the top of my head. But if you can go to the show notes of that episode number 53, and see all of those that are in there. And all of these you can find links to in the show notes of today's episode, which again is everythinghamradio.com/podcast/99. And if you know the episode numbers that I said and you want to look further into it, just change that 99 to whatever number that you want to look at, and you can get to it as well. So that rounds out the top 10. From there, from number 10, it goes down fairly slowly. Most of the differences is maybe 100 downloads per episode, something like that it goes down. So they're really close in numbers, so to speak. The biggest one is like the top 4. It goes from 3,200 to 36 to 39 to 42. Those are the big major jumps. And actually kind of surprised me that there isn't some of the other ones in there as well. For example, the first 4 episodes that I did, D-Star, System Fusion, P25, and DMR radio, or the systems, were the first 4 episodes that I did. On one hand, it surprises me that they're not at least in the top 10, but then on the other it doesn't. And for one, the episodes were my first, and they totally stunk. They were by myself, and there was some information that I got wrong. But the funny thing is that it seems like at least once a week, maybe once every other week, I get an email from somebody. Hey, by the way, I just listened to episode number 1 about D-Star, and you got this information wrong on it. Or I just finished the P25 episode, and you said that it's very rarely used in amateur radio. And I think the guy said that he'd been using P25 on ham radio for 10 years or something like that. So I'm constantly getting emails about the first 4 episodes that I said something wrong, and I totally get it. I totally admit it, because at the time I didn't have my mojo on, I guess you could say, and really lacked in the research part of the episodes. I was basically going on what I knew locally here. Because here we don't have any P25 repeaters. We have a handful of DMR repeaters. Most of them are either D-Star, which are still few and far between, or System Fusion, which tends to be the leading digital voice mode in the DFW area. At least here in Johnson County for sure, because I think every repeater we have is a System Fusion one. But anyways, I see it, but I don't see it, and I'm constantly getting downloads for this as well. It's not a whole lot, but every week or so when I look at my stats of downloads or Facebook shares and likes and stuff like that, I'm always seeing people visiting the page. I'm always getting at least 10-15 downloads for like the D-Star one or something like that. And it's entirely possible and really probable that somebody's searching for D-Star or System Fusion or something like that, and they come across my podcast episode and listening to it. And hopefully I did a good enough job that they get at least a glimpse of what it actually is, and not take away from the bad stuff that I got wrong. So anyways, if I had to choose a favorite episode out of all the episodes, I don't know if I could. Here it is, 2 years and 2 years and coming up on 3 months now that I've been doing this podcast, and almost 100 episodes. Well, actually, technically more than 100 episodes. And I have so many good things, so many good episodes or topics that we talked about. Of course, the digital stuff. I've talked about small computers, go packs, training, nets, the national parks on the air, summits on the air, awards, contesting, field day, fox hunting, youth and amateur radio, hams with disabilities that I talked with Christopher LaRue, W4ADL, and had a good conversation with him. I talked about broadband hamnet, a Wiles view of amateur radio, and just this last week, OX Wiles non-ham view of amateur radio. We've talked about Echolink, repeaters, the repeater book, and R-Finder. We've talked about them. We've talked about coax and Jamboree on the air, batteries, Aries race season, Skywarn, Winterfield Day. Of course, antenna construction and stealth antennas, Texas Parks on the Air, teaching a technician class, All-Star, a whole bunch, 99 episodes of stuff. And there's a lot of stuff in there. There's a lot of stuff that I hadn't got to, that I wish I had been able to. But, out of those 99 episodes, I thought about this long and hard about which one it would be. And I think probably the one that is my favorite was probably episode number 70. And episode number 70 was about remote control vehicles. And it was with Jason Howard, K6DNG. And Jason is a friend of George's, I believe. It lives out there, goes to the same club with him and stuff like that. And he talks about, he does a lot of model airplanes, model helicopters, quadcopters, stuff like that, which is another thing that I've always loved to do. Getting out and flying stuff. That's one of the hobbies that I would have always wanted to get into, but never really been able to until recently. Actually, I have a drone now that I got for Christmas. Nothing fancy or anything like that, but still. But we talked about, ham radio actually has a portion of the 6-meter band that allows you to use it for remote control operations of model airplanes or cars or boats or what have you. And we talked about that, and we had talked about, not only using it to control them, but we also have part of the spectrum in, I want to say 2.1 gigahertz maybe, or 5.8, something like that, that can also be used for telemetry of a model aircraft, or model car or boat or train or whatever, and how he uses amateur radio in that. And I always thought that it would be for controlling it, because you can use more power, so you'll have bigger range and stuff like that. But for him, he uses amateur radio more for the first person view camera, because it has a higher transmitter power. So yeah, that was probably my favorite if I had to choose one. It definitely, a very close second runner-up would be pretty much any episode that I've done with Ian. Ian is such a great guy, and we laugh and cut up all through the episode, and I'm sure a lot of times you realize how we go off subject to a certain extent. So that pretty much is all that I have for this episode. So we're going to hear a quick word from Dan Romanchik, KB6NU, and when we come back, we're going to maybe talk a little bit more and then wrap it up. So stick around, y'all. We'll be right back.
Hi, this is Dan, KB6NU, author of the No Nonsense Amateur Radio License Study Guides. My study guides have helped thousands get their license or upgrade to general class or extra class, and they can help you too. What makes them unique is my no-nonsense style. I don't bamboozle you with a lot of text. Instead, I give you just what you need to know in a simple, straightforward way that's designed to help you pass the test. One reader even told me, your study guide explained in a couple of paragraphs topics that the license manual needed a couple of pages to cover. Another wrote, the clarity and simplicity of your descriptions blew the license manual away. My study guides are available in paperback, in a variety of ebook formats, and even as audiobooks. Get your copy today. Go to kb6nu.com/ETHR for more info. Thanks.
All right, so we are back. I guess in this last segment, we want to kind of talk about what's going on with me. As I've told you before, my wife and I are starting a woodworking business, making signs and other things, and it's actually starting to take off a little bit, and I've really enjoyed it. I've made and sold probably, 15 signs or so in the last month or so. So it's starting to pick up a little bit, and hopefully it'll really take off here in the very near future. But we still have the kids. They are growing like weeds. I tell you what, if you have small kids out there, hold on to them as tight as you can, because they grow up way too fast. We got our son when he was 3 months old, and he's just past 18 months, and he is just doing awesome. Starting to talk. He makes faces and plays and runs and just does the typical boy stuff, and it's just coming so far in such a short time. The two young girls that I have are just absolutely blossoming, just smart as firecracker, smart as a whip, and every day I see them just like transform in front of my eyes. It's such a amazing feeling to see them grow and flourish and learn stuff and do it and just have fun. My oldest daughter, who's 13, we've had some issues with her, and we're still working on that, but it's still good. And there's a lot of stuff going on. I'm gonna hopefully be starting the police academy here pretty soon. With my work is going to be sending me to it, so my career path might be taking a slight detour to what it has been in the past. But again, that all kind of hinges on how this new business goes and how quickly it takes off. It might not be happening, or it might happen. It might still continue happening, but I'll just have to take a break from doing the woodworking and stuff. I've made several signs for people. Like I said, I've had about 15, 20 orders or so. in the past month alone. Made several ham radio signs that people have bought from me on here. So if you would like something made, a sign of some kind made, or something like that, definitely head on over to our website, which is 2xcproducts.com. And you can actually go on to the Field Radio Podcast YouTube channel and see one of the ones that I made for John up there. Made one of his podcast logo. So yeah, I mean that's where I am. That's where we are right now. So I guess that pretty much wraps it up. I so want to thank each and every one of y'all for your continued support, for listening and sharing this podcast and my blog. As far as my blog goes, I've been writing a little bit more with it. I've been posting a whole lot more than I have in the past, which is just kind of easier to a certain degree than doing these podcast episodes. But I'm enjoying it, and yes, it is a lot more work, but it's fun all at the same time. Yeah, so I guess that's pretty much it. Again, you can find the show notes of this episode at everythinghamradio.com/podcast/99. I'm on Facebook, facebook.com/everythinghamradio, and groups/everythinghamradio. I am on Twitter at K5CLM, youtube.com/everythinghamradio. Bunch of stuff, bunch of places that I'm at. And actually, I think I'm on like Twitter and Pinterest, or not Twitter. Well, of course I'm on Twitter, but Instagram, Pinterest, stuff like that as well. So there's a lot of places you can find. You can listen right on the show notes. You can listen to the episode that way. So yeah, so thank y'all very much again for listening. If you would like to support, show your support, you can make a donation through PayPal. You can shop on Amazon using my affiliate link, and several other ways as well. You can become a Patreon to the show, and you can find that at everythinghamradio.com/support. If you're not on the mailing list and would like to, there is a form at the bottom of the show notes you can fill out, or you can go to everythinghamradio.com/subscribe. Fill out that form, click on the Sign Me Up button, you'll get an email in your inbox with a link that you'll need to click on to confirm that you actually requested to be on my mailing list. So I guess that pretty much wraps it up y'all. I want to thank y'all for all you do, for all your support, and for listening, and until next time, this is K5CLM signing out. 73 y'all.